Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Reason Best and YouTube's premium channel about all things women's football. And match day number 8 has just wrapped up here with some very scintillating last minute shenanigans from Australia versus Nigeria. But we'll get to that later on in the video. First of all, we'd like to kick off this video about what we learned with the USA versus the Netherlands. The USA lined up in a 4-3-3 formation and the Netherlands lined up in a 3-1-4-2 formation. And pretty much from the word go, this game was completely dominated by the Netherlands from start to finish, as despite the USA being the strong favorites going into this match, obviously given their pedigree, they were completely played off the pitch by the Netherlands, particularly in the beginning moments of the game, and eventually the efforts of the Netherlands came off as in the 16th minute, Joe Ward scored from a very beautifully shot low effort to go past the keeper and give the Netherlands the 1-0 lead after Victoria Palova recycled the ball from a failed cross to Ward, who then converted to give the Netherlands the early lead. And from this point forward, despite the attempts by the USA to try and get back in the game, they were unable to, as the Netherlands managed to keep them at bay. And at the end of the first half, it was still 1-0 to the Netherlands, and the USA were completely playing on the back foot here. The Dutch domination would continue well into the second half. It was pretty much business as usual, as the Netherlands were looking for the goal to finally seal a very comfortable lead and hopefully the 3 points for themselves against the USA, whereas the USA had begun to wake up and look for opportunities for themselves. And throughout the second half, the USA had the domination when it comes to chances created, but they were still unable to convert. That is, of course, up until the 62nd minute, as hell had no fury than Lindsey Horan scored, who, on the back of being tackled very roughly by her Lyon teammate Van der Donk, she scored from a corner to give the USA the 1-1 goal and put themselves back in the game. And from this point forward, it was pretty much teetering between the USA and the Netherlands. The USA were coming in more frantically, more viciously, and they got some very key opportunities, such as in the 67th minute where Alex Morgan scored to seemingly give the USA the lead for the first time in the match, but unfortunately that effort was ruled offside. And this would be the same for any of the other attempts by the USA from the likes of Rodman, who did their best to try and give them the lead, but it was a little bit too late, as in the end the match would end up 1-1 with both teams sharing the points here. And it was a very dominant display of the potential of the Netherlands here, as they did give the USA not only a run for their money, but they completely overwhelmed the current reigning champions completely throughout the entirety of the first and second half. And in spite of the chances that the USA had, admittedly they were more than the Netherlands, they were very wasteful and did not have the best of opportunities to get through on goal, apart from Horan's header in the 62nd minute. Overall, the Netherlands will definitely feel hard done by on not being able to not only score to double their lead, but also hang on to their lead itself, as they've done a very good job of playing the USA off the park. And as for the USA, it is a very worrying sign that maybe they're not at the peak of their powers quite yet. Obviously, with the current squad they have, it's a very strong mix of youth and experience. So for some of those players who are on the pitch there for the USA, they hadn't really been in such a tense game situation before. So going into the knockout stages, where presumably both the USA and the Netherlands go through to, the Netherlands look like they're going to be definitely the stronger team to look out for as they look for redemption from their 2019 loss, and the USA will definitely need to go back to the drawing board and see where things went wrong in this game against the Netherlands should they seek to get their 5th World Cup crown later on in the tournament. The next match of the day gave us Portugal facing off against Vietnam, two debut nations going head-to-head for the first time in the tournament, and Portugal lined up in a 3-4-1-2 formation and Vietnam lined up in a very defensive 5-4-1 formation. And given their opposition, Vietnam had every right to be afraid of Portugal, as in the opening stages of the game, Portugal were coming at them with everything that they had. And eventually the efforts of the Portuguese were paid off, as in the 6th minute, Encarnação scored to open the scoring through a very good cross that landed at her feet, which she blasted the ball through to the back of the net to give the Portuguese the early lead. And just 14 minutes later, Encarnação would turn from goal scorer to goal provider as she put Kika Nasser through on goal to score and make it 2-0 to Portugal. And this goal would prove to be the defining moment of the game, as from this point forward, Vietnam started to come back more and more into the game and play with much more confidence against Portugal and even threatened at many different moments throughout the first half to try and get themselves on the score sheet and do their best to get back into the game. But unfortunately, going into the second half, it was still 2-0 to Portugal. And Vietnam would pick up where they left off as they began the early proceedings of the second half, doing their best to get themselves on the score sheet and give Portugal a run for their money. Portugal themselves were doing their best to try and stave off this attack from the Vietnamese players, and they managed to ever so slightly in spite of the looming threat of the Vietnamese players. And eventually the match would end 2-0 to the Portuguese after a very enthralling second half that was very unfortunate for the Vietnam players, who in spite of their best attempts, especially throughout the second half, they could just not get themselves at the very least on the score sheet and at most come back to force a draw against Portugal. For Portugal, this match served as a very good confidence booster ahead of their crunch match against the USA, but at the same time it showed that they're very capable of hanging in the World Cup. And unlike their previous match against the Netherlands, where they were playing very nervously and very cautiously, here they were playing a very free-flowing attack style of football, and that should be highly commended to the coach and the players themselves, and hopefully they can carry that same style of football into their game against the USA. And unfortunately for Vietnam, it does confirm that they're the fourth team to be eliminated from the Women's World Cup. But the team should be very proud of having come this far, especially for such a low-ranking team in the FIFA World Rankings. And I do think that given enough backing from the Vietnamese Football Federation, the team can not only come back to the World Cup, but can actually perform on a much more improved basis, as this is only the start for them. And with the proper backing in the financial and other resource-centered approach, it will be a very good time to play football, especially if you're a little girl in Vietnam. But moving on from that, our final match saw the host Australia going up against Nigeria, with Australia lining up in a 4-3-3 formation and Nigeria lining up themselves also in a 4-3-3 formation. And obviously going into this match, Australia were again without their talisman Sam Kerr, but that did not seem to faze the Australians at all in the first half, as they were pretty much dominant, with Nigeria being on the back foot and defending for heavy periods throughout the first half. And as for Australia, they took so many chances and could have gotten the lead, particularly in the 13th minute where Steph Catley had a shot saved from near post by Ndozi, and in the 31st minute Russell was unable to guide the ball into the net from a corner set piece. But fortunately, all the attempts by the Australians did eventually pay off, as in the first minute of extra time in the first half, there was a very good break by the Australian team, which was finished off by Van Egmond to give the Australians the lead going into the second half. And that would have been the case if it had not been for the heroics of Kanu, who finished off a very great cross to put the Nigerians back into the game and make it 1-1 for the Super Falcons going into the second half. And the wave of momentum would be carried on by the Nigerians, as going into the second half they were the dominant team and Australia were now finding themselves on the back foot. As much as Australia were getting some very good opportunities to get out of their own defense and attack the opposition, Nigeria making sure they would have absolutely no chance, as in the 64th minute a deflected header from Adibade found its way to Ohale, who scored to make sure that Nigeria would be a goal up and take the lead for the first time in this match. And the goal scoring heroics would not stop for the Super Falcons, as super substitute Oshwala would make sure that they would double their lead in the 72nd minute after she chipped the ball into the empty net on the back of some very poor and shoddy defending from the Australians, as Oshwala went on to celebrate in that fashion that deserves to be hung up in the Louvre in my own personal and humble opinion. And from this point forward, it was pretty much the ball that was in Nigeria's court, as they made sure to stave off any attack or influence by the Australians up until extra time, of course, where Australia, knowing that they were on the back foot and with 11 minutes to go, they decided to switch up their attack and go for broke. This approach was highlighted in the 4th minute of extra time, where Caitlin Ford had a point-blank header saved by Ndozi of Nigeria. But luckily, the all-out approach taken by the Australians would pay off some dividends, as in the 9th minute of extra time, Kennedy would head in a corner to give Australia a fighting chance. But unfortunately, the Nigerians would hang in there to the heartache of the Matildas here, as Nigeria ran out 3-2 winners to keep them level on points with Canada. From the beginning to the end, this match was pure box office, matches, and both teams left it all out on the pitch here. There isn't really something that we could learn from this match, as pretty much it was even and it could have gone either way, but it just happened to be a situation whereby Nigeria wanted to win more. And for Australia, they'll be happy that for the next match, and should they qualify out of the group stages, they will have Sam Kerr back in the team. And for Nigeria, it's a very good showing by the team. It shows that Waldrum and his Chargers have the potential to go very deep in the tournament here, and both teams must be highly commended for their efforts in this game. And those are the things that we learned from today's matches at the Women's World Cup. It was a very entertaining set of matches, and hopefully the games that will be on tomorrow can follow on from just the Australia-Nigeria match alone in terms of the high stakes nature of that game. But other than that, that will do it for today's video. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow after the next round of matches have concluded.